Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in the EnergyBiz Leadership Forum. It's great to have Accenture here. And I just wanted to start off with a question about the challenges and opportunities in the power industry. I mean, what are you seeing as being some of the critical challenges and opportunities that utility companies are facing today? Sharon, do you want to start?
Yeah, there's three that I would mention that we're seeing surface among the various utilities here in North America. The first would be, most utilities have come to appreciate and recognize the importance of the communications and managing the stakeholder plan. And I know in recent months we have seen in the press various things that have come out that have made this very much in the forefront. So I think people are recognizing it's very important as they start on these smart grid journeys that they have a communications and an engagement plan. The second is, as they start, they also realize that this thing is not just about technology. It is affecting people and process. And if you start on a technology rollout without addressing how it's actually going to affect your overall operation, that is going to be a problem. So addressing what are all the business processes that are changed and what are the type of skills in this new world that we need. And last but not least is, while there's been good movement in our industry around standards, we're not going to get to where we need to be as an industry unless we go the next step and we put in place some sort of organization or a collaborative effort where we do some interoperability testing. Because what we're finding is, while vendors are taking these standards, they're still open to interpretation, and vendors are implementing what they believe is a standard solution. And you take two things and put it together and they don't work necessarily together. So I think having a interoperability set or a harness by which people can test together will actually help us, that at the end, when people are doing what we all believe are the right things, it still hangs together.
Great.
I want to add to Sharon's second point, which was around it's not about technology silly. In particular, I think one of the biggest challenges we're going to face is, how do we really bring the customer along? You know, 2/3 of all of the business cases for smart metering and smart grid in North America rely on permanent, sustainable consumer behavior change. We're looking at an industry like utilities where 80% of the business processes in the typical utility that are customer facing have not changed in 25 years. And many of these utilities are really relying on the same processes, the same procedures, and the same sort of core organization that they had, you know, many years ago. For all of this technology to be used in the way that it's been intended, which is to reduce energy or to improve energy efficiency and reduce consumption, consumers are going to have to understand it. They're going to have to perceive value in it. They're going to have to find a way to use it in the most convenient possible way. And I would say that we're still in a point, kind of an inflection point, where most of the focus is on the technology, most of the focus is on the standards, and rightly so. There's a lot of complexities in getting that infrastructure in place. But quickly we're going to realize that even more complex than that are all those human beings at the other end of these smart meters.
Absolutely. So what do you see as being the role of the federal government in all this? I mean, you certainly mentioned that it's more than just technology, it's consumer engagement, business process change. I mean, from a policy standpoint, where is the federal government involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's been one that's been quite debated in the industry. I think so let me back up. The federal government did put out EPACT in 2005. Then they came out with the economic stimulus, and then they've had a series of legislations that have come out. Where I think we still have a problem is that each state still has its ability to interpret and put this framework in place, and what that causes is a fair amount of uncertainty and time to accomplish anything. So if you're an investor on utility and your service territory spans multiple states, it's a bit problematic in that trying to get through each state by state set of rules in order to roll out so that you can offer the same service to all your classic customers is a bit of a problem. I think if we had more of a national policy or guideline, it would certainly make being able to deploy and being able to offer programs to your customers a bit easier. The state-by-state effort that has to, in the end, be accomplished to move forward is really, really a challenge, especially for the utilities in multi-state jurisdiction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that balance between the state and federal level is...
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing, I readily admit, but the situation we're in today is just problematic trying to get through the process. So,
do you have anything you want to add, Greg?
I would reflect on one other additional point, which is there's a lot of focus on the federal government and then on the state government. But if you look at who consumers really trust, they often don't necessarily trust the federal government with a lot of the messaging.
Yeah.
They also don't necessarily trust or understand the credibility of of their local utility or their local energy provider. So where are consumers going to turn for that sort of independent voice on energy efficiency and conservation and that sort of adoption that needs to happen? They're going to turn to their local communities first. And so we're going to see a lot of partnerships that are going to need to be made between local energy providers and utilities and local governments and third-party sort of volunteer organizations. That's going to be very important. It's a lot like in the 70s with the seat belts or with the littering campaigns or a number of the sort of intangible campaigns of the past. Those were most effective because they were partnerships between the people who were trying to generate the demand and the local communities.
That's a great point. Now what about, and I mean we're in DC right now, so the focus is always a little bit more on the federal government here. I mean, what do you see in terms of the federal spending that's happened in the power industry? I mean, have you seen it make a significant difference at this point?
Not yet, because the money hasn't worked its way through the system.
Yeah.
As we sit here today, we still don't have signed contracts. So step one is getting the contracts signed so that the money can start flowing. So I think we will see it. My prediction is we're really not going to start seeing the effects of it till probably later this year. It'll take some time to start working its way through and for movement and acceleration, since of the non-demonstration grants, the purpose of that was to accelerate deployments. And so we haven't seen that acceleration happen yet, but everyone is working, there's a lot of activity trying to get poised for it, and I believe we'll see it probably over the next 6 to 7 months.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's a curious paradox. On one hand, we're not seeing the momentum, but on the other hand, we're seeing an incredible amount of interest and an incredible amount of hype. And to some extent, we're going to have to step back at some point and look at what are all the pilots that have already been underway, and how do you sort of assimilate all of that and make sure that we don't waste federal funding by repeating or triple repeating some pilots or some tests that have already been done multiple times. It appears, we can see a lot of the pilots and the projects that are going on in North America, and there seems to be a lot of redundancy already built in. And I think once there's approval and the papers are signed, we're hoping that it'll sharpen people's focus a bit more on actually getting to scalable and sustainable solutions.
Yeah, definitely a great point. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you,
Sure.
Christine.